The wind came so suddenly that Ella barely had time to grab her backpack. She ducked into a drainage culvert just as debris started flying past like shrapnel. For nearly 30 minutes, she lay curled in mud, listening to trees snap and metal twist. When it ended, she climbed out to find her street unrecognizable. Cars flipped, roofs gone. But the culvert had protected her completely. Later, a rescuer said it was the smartest dumb luck he'd seen all week. Preliminary assessments show that nearly 70% of homes and buildings in the coastal counties sustained wind-related damage during the recent hurricane. Over 40 mobile homes were completely overturned, and at least 12 commercial structures lost significant portions of their roofs. Utility poles were snapped along 19 major roads, and wind gusts were measured up to 129 miles per hour in some areas. Officials noted that older buildings were disproportionately affected. Insurance teams have begun documenting losses, with early estimates in the hundreds of millions. Emergency shelters remain at capacity as debris removal continues. The downtown business district was left in ruins after sustained winds sheared off signage, shattered storefronts, and caused partial collapses in 4 commercial buildings. The city estimates more than $70 million in damage to infrastructure alone. Crews are still working to clear glass and metal from the main thoroughfares. Of the 123 businesses surveyed post-storm, only 27 were able to reopen. Local officials have requested federal disaster relief as cleanup efforts intensify. A pastor live-streamed prayers throughout the hurricane using backup battery packs. Hundreds tuned in from darkened homes and flooded shelters. "It kept us connected," one viewer wrote. "I couldn't see the sky, but I could hear faith." The stream ran 14 hours without pause. Paramedics carried a boy with cerebral palsy down 4 flights of stairs after the elevator failed and rising water threatened the building. His wheelchair was damaged, but they improvised with a rolling dolly and straps. "They didn't hesitate," said his mother. "They treated him like family." The family was later airlifted to a shelter equipped for medical needs. After the storm cleared, dozens of residents posted photos of found items to help neighbors reconnect with lost property. One family was shocked to see their trampoline wedged high in a pine tree 2 streets over, despite having tied it down. "It looked like a nest for giant birds," the father said. The trampoline frame was twisted, but mostly intact. With help from a tree service, they managed to recover it. "Next time," he laughed, "I'm chaining it to the car." Officials continue to warn that unsecured backyard items can become deadly projectiles in hurricane winds. After the storm, a cross made of driftwood was discovered lodged upright in a sand dune where dozens had sought shelter. Locals have since preserved it as a symbol. "It felt like he marked the place where we were saved," said one evacuee. "We'll never move it." In one neighborhood, a woman returned to find her brother's car still in the driveway, keys inside, but no sign of him. His phone last pinged from the cell tower nearby minutes before landfall. Teams search surrounding woods and ditches. As of Friday, he remains missing. It is one of 127 open missing person cases linked to the storm. When the winds ripped the roof from their small home, Ana Martinez had only seconds to react. She threw a mattress over her 2 young sons and laid across it as debris slammed into the walls and shattered glass flew. "It sounded like a freight train crashing through the sky," she said. For nearly an hour, she held still, praying the house wouldn't collapse. The family was later found shaken but unharmed. The house was destroyed, except for the bedroom where they hid. "She saved their lives," one responder said. "Pure instinct and courage." A firefighter swam across a flooded intersection carrying a life vest in his teeth. Inside the stranded SUV was a woman 9 months pregnant. Contractions already started. With help from neighbors, she was floated on an air mattress to dry ground, then rushed to a hospital. Her baby was born 2 hours later, healthy and strong. "He came into the world like a rescue mission," the father said. A giant inflatable gorilla, once perched above a used car lot, was spotted drifting high above rural farmland after being snatched by hurricane winds. Witnesses reported seeing the 30-foot figure tumbling through the sky, like a flying bear doing flips. It eventually landed in a tree nearly 12 miles away, startling a herd of cattle. No one was injured, but videos of the airborne mascot have gone viral. "He was our landmark," said the dealership owner. "Now he's a legend." Officials reminded business owners to deflate outdoor inflatables before storms. After the storm passed, silence fell so suddenly it felt wrong. Everything that once made sound, birds, cars, wind chimes, was gone or broken. James stood barefoot in the wet grass, staring at the sky. His house had lost half its roof, and a pine tree lay across his porch. But all he could think about was how quiet the world had become. "It felt like the wind stole the noise," he later told a neighbor. That night, he slept on a mattress in the garage, listening for anything to return. Responders searching a flooded street found a 2-year-old girl sitting on a floating couch, soaked but alive, her arms wrapped tightly around the family dog. No adults were nearby. The home had been destroyed hours earlier, and it's believed the rising water lifted the furniture to safety. The dog, a Labrador mix, reportedly barked until rescuers approached. Both were taken to a shelter, where the girl was quickly reunited with relatives. "We don't know how they survived," one firefighter said, but that dog never left her side. Authorities are calling it a small miracle amid widespread devastation. During peak gusts, Harold Grant stepped outside to check on his generator and was lifted off his feet by hurricane winds. He landed 30 feet away in a muddy ditch, stunned but alive. "It felt like a hand just picked me up and dropped me," he said. He suffered bruises and a fractured wrist, but managed to crawl back inside his home before the next wave of wind hit. Emergency crews later found trees snapped like twigs in his yard. "I'll never take wind warnings lightly again," Grant said from his hospital bed, smiling weakly. A caravan of RVs and pickup trucks crawled along the interstate, packed with families, pets, and everything they could strap down. Some pulled boats, others had tarps over furniture. Gas ran out in 2 towns, and the National Guard airlifted fuel to stranded drivers. It was the largest civilian evacuation the county had seen since the 1990s, with more than 150,000 people leaving in under 48 hours.
Oh mein Gott. Alter.
Over 4,000 utility poles were downed across the affected zone, leaving more than 300,000 residents without power. Some communities may remain dark for weeks. Substations flooded, transmission lines snapped, and transformer fires were reported in multiple locations. Repair crews from 6 neighboring states have been dispatched, working 16-hour shifts. "We've never had this many lines down at once," said a utility spokesperson. Hospitals and shelters are running on backup generators, with fuel being airlifted into remote areas. A group of 5 hikers who had set out before the storm were reported overdue when families lost contact. Their last known location was near a backcountry trail in the national forest. Heavy winds toppled trees and blocked access roads. Rescue teams located their abandoned campsite but found no sign of the hikers. A coordinated search is underway with drones, dogs, and volunteers. The morning after, children wandered the neighborhood, pointing out what had changed. "That tree wasn't broken before," one said. "That trampoline wasn't there." They turned it into a game, spot the difference, but the parents watched in silence, tallying lost cars, collapsed roofs, shredded fences. One boy found a soggy storybook in a ditch and began reading aloud, sitting cross-legged on the wet sidewalk. Others joined him. For a moment, no one remembered the night's terror, only the sound of a child's voice trying to bring a story back to life. She didn't cry when the window broke, or when the front door blew open. But when she saw her wedding photo floating face down in the living room, water pooling beneath it, something in her cracked. She picked it up, wiped it gently, and sat down in the middle of the chaos, holding it in her lap. "We'll be okay," she said aloud, though no one else was there. Hours later, when help arrived, she was still sitting there, calm, still, like part of the house itself. In the early hours after the hurricane made landfall, 62-year-old Marvin Ellis carried his paralyzed neighbor 2 miles through waist-high floodwaters to reach a rescue point. With no cell service and streets submerged, Ellis wrapped the man in plastic sheeting, tied him to his back with extension cords, and waded through swirling debris. "I couldn't leave him. He's family," Ellis said. Both were treated for exhaustion and exposure. Paramedics say their survival came down to Ellis's strength, calm thinking, and deep sense of duty. "He saved my life," the neighbor whispered from his hospital bed. I was holding a mug of coffee when it happened. 1 second, the porch was there, the swing, the plants, the little welcome mat. The next, it lifted like a magic carpet and vanished into the sky. I didn't scream. I just stood there with the door open and wind roaring like a jet engine. That porch had been there since '89. My daughter took her prom pictures on it. My dog gave birth under it, and now it's gone. I found the swing 2 blocks away, still swaying. Everything else? Somewhere in Kansas, maybe. An old man stood in the ruins of his workshop, running his hands over rusted tools he'd once polished every week. The wind had knocked down one wall, but left the other 3 standing, like a set on a stage. He didn't speak much as neighbors offered help. Instead, he swept sawdust from the floor, straightened a stool, and set a bent hammer carefully on the bench. "It's not gone," he finally said. "Just quieter now." The agricultural sector suffered heavy losses, with initial reports indicating over 60% of local crops destroyed. Grain silos crumpled like cans, and irrigation systems were twisted beyond recognition. Dozens of livestock barns collapsed, and fencing across thousands of acres was torn away. Farmers say it could take years to recover. One dairy cooperative reported 180 animals missing or dead. The State Agricultural Board is coordinating emergency aid and veterinary support in the hardest-hit rural zones. Coast Guard crews rescued 27 people from rooftops in one suburb alone. High water made roads impassable, and helicopters worked for hours. Most were elderly, some waving towels or flashlights. One couple was lowered in a harness with their cat in a laundry basket. All were taken to a makeshift landing zone at the football stadium and evaluated for injuries.
A backyard was left almost completely demolished after the destruction of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico.
A woman driving home before the worst of the winds hit watched in horror as the truck in front of her lifted off the highway and spun like a paper cup before crashing into a ditch. She pulled over, heart pounding, expecting the worst, but the driver crawled out, dazed but unharmed. "He looked more confused than injured," she said. Authorities said the wind reached over 110 miles per hour in that area, enough to lift lightweight vehicles off the road surface. During the worst hours of the storm, volunteer firefighter Dana Price made solo trips by boat into flooded neighborhoods, rescuing 11 people, including a bedridden woman and 3 small children. With official resources overwhelmed, Price launched her own kayak from the fire station and worked through the night. "I just couldn't sit there and wait," she said. Battling wind, darkness, and floating wreckage, she pulled one family from a rooftop using bed sheets as rope. Residents are calling her a hero. "She didn't hesitate," one survivor said. "She saved us when no one else could get through." As winds intensified and their home began to shake, the Patel family abandoned their living room and climbed into the walk-in freezer at the back of their restaurant. With wind screaming outside and parts of the roof tearing away, they sat in darkness for over an hour, surrounded by bags of frozen vegetables and crates of meat. "It was the only room with no windows and a steel door," said Mrs. Patel. When they emerged, the dining area was destroyed, but the freezer was untouched. "Cold never felt so safe," joked their teenage son.